Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and I am here for a discussion video for you guys. Now this is actually a discussion video I've been wanting to do, so here we go. We're going to talk about it. So for this discussion video, I want to talk about musical growth and musical progression. Now, I feel like there's a lot of people that can view musical growth in many different ways, because I feel like a lot of people do have their own explanations and their own examples of musical growth, I guess. But this is just going to be my opinion on what I think musical growth is and how I would personally describe it. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into this. And I think I'm just going to get to the gist of what I think musical growth is. And I think the best way to describe it is to just keep getting into stuff that you normally wouldn't be into, as a music listener. Especially if you consider yourself a true music fan as well. You should always be exploring different bands and, different subgenres and whatnot. Now, here's something I want to point out. This isn't to say that, you should go out and explore every genre of music out there and become a fan of every genre of music out there. No, because, well, obviously, I'm not the biggest fan of some genres of music out there. That's not really what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, let's say, you only listen to maybe rock, or maybe you only listen to metal, I would say just expand upon that. That to me would be my definition. Like, for example, like if you have a hard time getting into certain bands, keep giving some bands a try. I mean, one example I can think of is, well, of course, I'm going to bring this up, the classic and modern debate. Now, this is, I know, something that I do bring up a lot, and mainly just because I'm so passionate about it, because I feel like there's a lot of people that are ignorant towards a lot of classic rock bands and a lot of classic heavy metal bands, because they just don't see any point in getting into those bands. They call those bands boring, or, they show no appreciation for them and think that they're irrelevant. Well, that's just generic dad rock. Like, music nowadays just sounds way more interesting, which I disagree with highly. I mean, I would say go into some bands with the right mindset. Again, I have to bring this up, this whole modern versus classic debate, because it's something that I still see to this day. And the reason that I get so passionate about this is because, let me tell you something. Back maybe 7 years ago, even 5 or 6 years ago even, I was probably the least qualified person to become a fan of the older styles of rock and heavy metal. And look where I'm at now. It's not impossible. If you think that there's no absolute way, zero chance, that you can get into classic rock or metal, you might be wrong. You very well could be wrong. And you might be asking, well, obviously it's not something that happens overnight. How did you get into classic rock and heavy metal? It's about the mindset that you go into with some bands. And that to me would be musical progression and musical growth. It is about the mindset that you go into with some bands. And if you ever wonder why you struggle with getting into certain bands, and if you are struggling to figure out why you're just only interested in a few bands, you very well could be the problem. It could be because your mindset is wrong. Your mindset is not in the right place. You might not be going into bands with a good mindset. Maybe your expectations are a little too high with some bands and some artists in a genre of music even. Maybe you're expecting stuff that's not really intended to be. One example I can definitely think of is with the modern hard rock community. Now, this is the community that I know I bring up a lot, and it's probably going to be the community that I bring up the most in this video, mainly because I do feel like, from what I have noticed, this is the community that I feel like struggles the most musically progressing and musically growing. And the reason for this is because I just feel like this is all that they'll stick with. You know what I'm saying? And, if you have a hard time getting into classic rock, go into it with a good mindset. And I know some people get on me with the whole mindset thing. Well, you go on about the mindset, it's about the sound. What does the music sound like? Forget the mindset. What does the music sound like? Now, here's the thing. Sound does matter, because I know some people were saying, well, what's the point in getting into some bands if you don't even like the sound? But you see, like I said about, me going into older bands and how I thought, I couldn't get into older bands and how I really didn't like any older band or classic band whatsoever. It's about the mindset, and once you go into some bands with a good mindset, that will help you like the sound. Of course, if someone who's a big hardcore 3 Days Grace fan or Breaking Benjamin fan or Linkin Park fan or whatever, if a person from one of those fan bases is checking out a band like Van Halen, of course they're going to have their complaints. But if they go into them with a good mindset, it might be successful for them. Realizing what the bands have meant to rock in general. Same goes for people that, only listen to modern metal. Maybe they're not going into classic metal with a good mindset. One of the things that I feel like would really help a lot of people with this debate in particular is when you go into certain bands, especially, once again, with older bands, act as if you're going into these bands listening to rock for the very first time. For example, if you only listen to modern rock and you're going to listen to bands like Led Zeppelin, act as if that's your first time ever checking out rock music. And just have an honest opinion about it. What do you think of the band? Go into, these bands with, try to go into these bands with no memory of what you're typically used to. Because I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to, their ignorance and stuff, I feel like a lot of people, it's not just, with this whole classic versus modern debate, but it also goes into that thing where they're going into some bands with the wrong mindset, and their expectations, I feel like, become a little too high, and they become let down. Because I feel like, well, again, with the modern rock community, I mean, a lot of them kind of expect everything that they listen to have this larger-than-life feel to it. Now, that's fine in some cases, but it doesn't need to be with every single band you listen to. What about the musicianship? It doesn't always have to be about, whatever sounds cool to you. Because if you just want cool sounds, that's what soundtracks are for. Listen to bands for, the instrumentation and the talent and the musicianship that they have to offer. You know what I mean? Now, there's not really anything wrong with, bands having, cool sounds to their music, because I understand that, I do myself. I like a lot of bands that use those as well. Theatrical elements, atmosphere, all that stuff is fine, as I think, as long as you appreciate the aspects of bands that don't use those certain things, that are a little more human sounding, that are a little more raw, you know what I mean? And, you need to go into some bands with a good mindset. And like I said, the mindset will help you appreciate and enjoy bands more. Think about what these bands have meant to the genre. That's what helped me get into older sounding music. Just knowing, how they impacted some of the bands that came out in the 2000s. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, act as if you're just listening to rock and metal for the first time. Or act as if it still was the 1970s. I mean, what would you do? Not listen to music? Just because the only rock bands that exist currently are Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, and bands like those? I mean, that's the mindset that I feel like a lot of people should go into with some bands. And it, like I said, it isn't just with this whole classic debate either. Let's say, I feel like, a lot of people that even listen to older sounding music in general, I think that they should definitely expand with, more modern stuff or newer stuff as well. Because I think they're missing out on a lot. Sure, I would agree it's probably not as good as the older stuff, because, I mean, nothing beats the pioneers in my opinion. But it's still worth checking out, and it's still good stuff nonetheless, There's still a lot of bands that formed in the 2000s that I'm a fan of. It is about the mindset. And this can go for subgenres as well. Maybe you have a hard time getting into a subgenre. Like maybe you have a hard time getting into prog. I think bands like Dream Theater and Queensryche would be good gateways. Now again, Depends on, you know, the style of music that you listen to, but I think you should be taking risks as a true music listener. And if you really do expect everything that you listen to or everything you check out to sound like what you already listen to, then where's the musical diversity? How are you supposed to have any diverse taste in your music library? You know, that wouldn't be much diversity if you expect every single thing you check out to sound like what you already listen to. That's all I'm trying to say. But let me know what you guys think. That would probably be my definition of musical growth, is basically get into stuff that you normally wouldn't be into, at least as far as rock and metal goes. Because I can't really speak on the behalf of other genres, because I just don't know, of course. Try... The thing that I look for in bands these days is stuff that I wouldn't have been able to get into 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. For example, 5 years ago, I don't even think I would have liked bands like Led Zeppelin. But look where I'm at now. I like the band now. That's all stuff to keep in mind, you know? Don't think it's impossible for you to not enjoy a style of rock or metal just because you're not used to it or whatever. But yeah, that's my video, guys. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.